Welcome to the SAG-AFTRA Foundation's Conversations at Home program. I'm Angelique Jackson from Variety. Before we are joined by our guests today, I want to let you know that the SAG-AFTRA Foundation is a nonprofit organization that relies entirely on donations to provide emergency assistance and free educational programs to SAG-AFTRA artists. This conversation is made possible thanks to the generosity of our supporters. Over the past year, the foundation has given over $7 million in COVID relief to more than 7,500 performers. If you are a SAG-AFTRA artist and need help, please ask. And if you can help, please give. Information can be found in the description of this video. Thank you so much for your support. And now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce actor Ciarán Hinds of Belfast. Hello, sir. How are you?
Oh, I'm grand. Thank you. I'm grand.
Well, thank you so much for joining us for this conversation as we unpack this great, lovely, and heartwarming film of Belfast, and also dive a little deeper into your storied filmography. I mean, when I was looking back just at the range and variation of projects that you've been able to be a part of, what stands out to you about the different movies and television series and stage shows that you've chosen to be a part of throughout your career? If there was a way to encapsulate all that you've done, what do you make of it?
It's like a ball of confusion, really. I mean, I'm by nature a day-to-day person, and that's probably why it's turned out, when you look back on my career, it's kind of rather eclectic. It's a whole bunch of this, that, and the other. And it's been very exciting, been fantastic journey. I've worked with extraordinary people, which I've been thrilled and grateful for, and often wondered what I was doing there, to be honest. The journey itself is quite magical. Sometimes being an actor, there's something about the faith and trust you have to put in things anyway. There's also the faith and trust that people put in you, which being brought up in Ireland with a bit of Catholic guilt, there's always that fear behind what you do that you're going to let someone down. The possibility is somebody's put their faith in you and you have accepted that, and then you might let them down. So behind that, there's this kind of ritual that I do. I know people have got their different rituals, but I usually have a little think just the night before we're going to start the project, whatever it is. And I light a little candle and have a think to myself. And the thing is, it often doesn't work. That's the truth of it. It often doesn't work, but sometimes it does. And whether I can convince myself it is the candle, or is actually, the truth is, it's more often than not the company that you're keeping and the creativity that's around you at the time that actually puts you into a place where there's a lot of excitement and grace, and things can be achieved in a very positive and exciting way.
What do you remember about the night before you started Belfast? What was it that you were musing or pondering before that first day of filming?
I was, because we were one of the first projects to go when the lockdown was happening in COVID. I think it was the second film that went in the UK at the time. And the protocol was very, very strict. And this was because Ken Branagh, the writer-director, the amazing gentleman that he is, didn't want to take risks on anybody, because some of us were of a certain age, shall I say, and therefore more at risk. So we were, in a way, we were all separate. We were on our own. We were brought together in a hotel, in a kind of campus place, and we were alone in a way, because the whole idea is there should be no contact outside of the imperative of what was necessary. And what was necessary was a bit of preparation together, minimal, absolutely minimal, but how we get to know each other to be able to create a family from who we are as people. And then that night, it was very strange, because I was in a hotel, like it was in an English countryside, and I was in a double-decker room, I know what a double-decker bus is, but when I went into the room, and it was kind of mock Tudor or something, so it was big, heavy furniture, and I went in, and it was like, who's all this for? And then I went, where's the bed? And then there were stairs, and then I went up, and then there was kind of a Gothic looking bed. It was just obviously the style of the place, but that is where we were placed because it was very useful for the locations the next morning. And it was kind of a strange atmosphere because you knew other cast, other creative people were around. But the rule was you get there, you lock your door, there'll be a man come in a car, you'll both be in masks, like the Lone Ranger or Zorro or something, and you will be driven to a place where some other stranger will take your temperature, give you a test, and then we begin work. It was kind of, that was a real weird start.
Doesn't give you a lot of time to ponder the acting because you're thinking also about all of the other things.
Well, that is true, the strangeness of it. But in a way, I guess that idea is like, because you're on your own, so it focuses in, there's no nothing to distract you. So those moments on your own, you can just read and think and prepare before to be a bit ready for when you meet the others, the other cast.
Well, let's wind back just a moment because you mentioned Sir Kenneth Branagh, who reached out to you with this script about the place that you are both from in Belfast. What do you remember about, where were you, I guess, rather, when he first mentioned that this was a movie that he would like for you to read?
I was rather pretentiously in Lyon, in France, actually. There you go. I was there because my wife, who's an actress as well, she's French Vietnamese, she was rehearsing a play there. And the rules were different for the COVID in different countries. And I went there because she was rehearsing, and I went there to be kind of Daisy domestic, to do the ironing, the hoovering, the cooking while she was at work. And while I was there, really enjoying the peace and quiet and the beauty of Lyon, I got a call out of the blue because nobody was expecting things to happen given the situation. I got a call out of the blue from my wonderful agent, Simon Beresford in London, and he said, there's been a call and Ken Branagh would like to talk to you. And I said, would he now? Well, tell him I'm prepared to listen. Anyway, he said, yeah, he'd like to have a Zoom call with you tomorrow. Would that be okay? So I said, absolutely fine. So Ken and I, who'd only really, maybe in our entire lives, crossed 3 times, but very briefly, for 2 minutes or 5 minutes, nothing to do with work or projects. And yet we grew up within a mile of each other in the same city, in almost the same decade. And we'd never really spent time. So this came out of the blue, really out of the blue. And he started talking about this story that he'd written about his family in Belfast. Of course, we from Belfast and Ireland all knew Ken Branagh came from Belfast because we're very proud of that, quietly very proud of it. But people in England just assume that he's very English because his accent's changed, and he's one of the great, great classical Shakespearean actors. And so when he said that, he was telling the story of his childhood in Belfast. I went, wow, that's extraordinary that you could go back there. And he said, no, I've always carried it with me. Weirdly, I've always carried it with me. It's been that thing when I was 9, just going on 10, when I was taken away. And yet those childhood memories of all that community, not just your immediate family, they go with you, but your extended, your cousins, the hundreds of cousins that were Irish cousins, and the community, all that. And he said, well, I've been carrying it, and not like a burden, but wanting to express it somehow. And when lockdown came, I had this moment, nothing much is going to happen, and I'm just going to write the story. And then, long story short, he said, would you play my grandfather? And I said, I'm not that old. He said, no. When I was 9. And so we went back, and he said, I tell you what, I said, I would love you to play it, but is it all right if I send you the script? He asked me, was it all right to send the script? And I said, it certainly is. And he sent it. I read it immediately within 5-10 pages. I was just hooked. Because he, by sending me that and his art of storytelling and the characters he created, he brought me back to my roots.
It's pretty amazing how transformative those words can be, whether you are from Belfast or from somewhere else. It just takes you back. It sucks you back into being that young child. What was it about Pop when you first read the script, and as you continued to explore this man, that really sticks with you? That, you know, obviously he has such great pieces of wisdom throughout the story, and a lot of cheekiness and fun as well. But what was it that, you know, when you think about this character, you know, 5, 10 years from now, will always stick with you about him?
I think it's that grace of a generation before my generation, and because I do remember it in my father's generation and his father, my mother's generation before, their kind of gentle stoicism of life, and not to be raging all the time if it's not working out. You accept so much. You will keep striving. You will keep working. You'll keep going in the direction you believe. But even if it doesn't work out the way you want it to, you're not going to let it eat you up. You're not. You're going to say, this is my lot. This is where I be. I will find contentment in where I've reached, no matter at what level, and not constantly striving. I need to get further. I need to make more. And those people were, and they were very, you know, the story comes from, you know, I came from a Catholic middle-class family. My father was a doctor. Kens were working-class Protestant. You know, and you always think, oh, the poor working class Catholics and the sort of middle class Protestants. But, you know, it's not all black and white. There's a lot of gray areas in there. But it's about the spirit of the people. And I do believe they had their own sense. And I'm not talking about morality on religious terms, just a sense of morality in human terms, actually, in human behavior, and how to, even if you disagreed with someone, that you didn't have to be rude about it. You know, you could disagree and agree to disagree. And that manner of connecting with people, that generation before, I guess, because, you know, but they didn't have all the diversions of television and film and all the social media. So they really had to use all of themselves as human beings and couldn't duck away from the fact that, oh, I'm going to get into this other thing aside. So the relationships between those people, that's what I think will always stay with me in the future, and was revealed in the film.
Well, I'd love to talk a little bit about the relationships that Pop has in this film. You know, first, obviously, it is a coming of age story led by the young Jude Hill as, you know, a younger version of Ken as Buddy. And then, of course, with Jamie Dornan as Pa, and on through to you as Pop. Those scenes of the kind of three generations, in particular, obviously, I'm always struck as Pop is in the hospital, and they're kind of sitting on either side of his bed, and, you know, having these conversations. What did you make of that exploration, the exploration of these three generations of young men at various stages of their life? What stuck out to you about that relationship?
I could somehow see and feel through Ken's writing an absolute connection, even though of a family, the way he had written it, even though, of course, Jamie, Jude, and myself were from different families, but how he was able to explore very briefly, with a couple of hours rehearsal or talking or conversation, how to bond as a family. And also the little clues that he'd given, not directly, that you look for in a script. And the idea that, you know, when you see, there's a little moment where you see Jamie as Pa just betting on a horse, or going to bet on a horse, because that's what they did. Or there's just one shot of in a pub having a pint with some friends. Pop would have been exactly the same. You know, but a generation before, you know, and because they're poor, they're trying to, with a little bit more money, maybe you win in the horses, you know, they're eking out a little bit. Pop's still at it, but not very successful. But in his youth, he would have been in the bars, he would have been borrowing or giving and all that kind of way. And the spirit of Buddy that we see as he watches these people, and he see how kind of open and warm they kind of are, even though they have a sense of the seriousness of life, but they're always trying to mine all those little colors of humor that are on the edges of even the most difficult and tragic things. They're always trying to mine it for some kind of release. And I think that was the connection in the family, even the women in the family, you know, but you had Judi Dench, the brilliant Judi Dench, you know, having a poke at everybody if they don't like it, but it's done with a wit, a sharp, you know, rapacious wit, and Caitríona Balfe as Ma, you know, and when she goes off, because her job is so extraordinary that she loves him so much, but she has to be, when she gets angry, it's out of love and it's out of care, and yet at the same time she can be cheeky and has this great flirting nature and this sense of bedevilment that you can see, like when they dance, when they play. And I think that's maybe part of the culture that Ken managed, without having to describe it in the written word, that he managed to put it in the language of the characters.
You mentioned, of course, the great Dame Judi Dench. We get a chance to see tinges and of who they were as younger people with Pop and Granny, and the evolution of their love. Talk about the opportunity to share this space and the screen with her, and to kind of explore their relationship as well.
Well, I have to say, quite honestly, it was kind of, when the cameras rolled and we went to work to communicate together, it was like timeless. But it was also like time stopped. It was kind of the opposite of each other at the same time. It was so weird because she's so present and so immediate and so connected and so funny, and she could be in and out of it in a second, that the idea of just trying to connect with her and be with her and go, wow, and then say, no, not wow. Give her a piece of your mind. Let her know who you are yourself, as she's letting you know, or you're feeling who she is. Let her know who you are. And I don't, sometimes there's things that's impossible to describe. It's by osmosis, or it's about a connection, that the dance is not structured, but there's two people dancing or sparring together, but it's because the conductor of the, in this case, Ken, the director, had just given the atmosphere and the space in which to work. And obviously, he's trusted Judi so much over 12 different times they've worked together. And what's wonderful is to hear their verbal repartee together when Ken, as she comes onto set, and Ken winds her up amazingly, saying, all right, hear ye, pray silence for the great dame of the British theatre. And then all you hear from Judi is, just the connection is very real, very true. And then within a second, she's suddenly looking like my own Aunt Molly from 50, 60 years ago, and not the woman that came into work that day. So
I love hearing that a bit, that you kind of had to decipher how to work together with someone that I know that you admire so much. How did this experience stretch you as an actor? What did making Belfast teach you about your own craft and your approach to making movies?
It's like we're always learning, aren't we? We really are. And I don't know, I did feel a sense, maybe it was because I was coming back to my roots a bit, that having been out in the wild world and taking on all these different adventures in different places, going back to my roots, that suddenly maybe it was just that moment of just be quiet at home for a moment. Maybe I'd be quiet at home, and therefore maybe just an easier sense of myself, to be open to the possibilities of what might transpire. Not to say we need to get to this point in the scene. This is what we have to achieve before we start, is to begin and listen and see where you arrive. And that is something that I haven't had that much chance to explore, just because of the nature of time and the nature of timing and getting things done. And I guess because this was Ken's memories, he could then play or juggle or with the edit or say like where that all sits inside the story of his younger life. It was very interesting.
No, I was just going to say, what was, prior to this project, what was your process for finding characters? How do you find yourself preparing for a role? The way you work with your script, or the way that you analyze or break down character?
Yeah, there's that idea of method, how we approach it. I'm pretty basic in my approach, really. I mean, I would say if you're going to do a script, first of all, you read script, the whole of it, just to see what happens to you when you read a whole story. Then read it again, paying attention to the characters in the story. not just the visual movement, the structure, narrative, whatever, just the characters and who these people might be. And then a third time to see like whatever role, whatever size, what your character might be in it. And that gives you, to me, that gives you a sense of just a deeper run at where you might be heading, rather than just read it and say yes or no. Just to read it and try and put a slightly different hat on as you read it, because it's like getting out of bed the wrong side. Maybe if you got out the right side, it might have been great, but hey, get out of the wrong side again. So there's that, and then because I don't take on. When I was younger, I did a few physical roles, down horseback and a bit of sword fighting and all that. That's way beyond me now. And I would go so far as to say I'm not a great gym bunny, but the idea between if it's not on the page, where is it? But in fact, it is on the page, but it's the white bits of the page. We read the dark bits, the black bits, the typewritten bits. But some of the great writers, they go, and there's a great writer I worked with a lot called Conor McPherson. He's an Irish writer, a great man of the theatre and stuff. And we've done about 4 or 5 projects together. And he talks about the white on the page, that he says, no, I write this stuff and it's there in my head. But all that white stuff that's not written on, that's why I love when I get you guys together to come in and fill in all that bit of whatever it is, whether it's a look, whether it's a heart, whether it's a row, whether it's whatever it is. There's the language to speak, and then there's all the souls that come in to give it the depth and the color, and kind of try and aim for that. It's not always successful, but. Yeah.
I would beg to differ, and I think the 120 screen credits would also beg to differ. But that you're right. That is the acting of it, is really bringing the soul to the project. And I want to look back to that transition from stage to screen, that first role, first like official screen credit of film with Excalibur. What do you remember about taking that leap and making screen work such a featured part of your career in addition to being on stage?
Well, to be honest, I was so naive at that age. I guess I was about 27, and I'd just been doing theatre. I'd been in theatre. I'd trained as a theatre actor. I'd done bits of fringe theatre and repertory theatre, and I'd never been in the national theatres then. And we used to work in those days like without an agent. You'd sometimes get a job just by being in a pub, and somebody would say, "What's your man do?" He's an actor. Is he any good? Yeah, he's not bad. All right, well, I was thinking of doing this thing. And sometimes you used to get work like that. And anyway, I was working in Dublin at the time, and I was doing a small play in a fringe theatre, and somebody came to see it and was kind of interested in what I was, and introduced me to a casting director to meet John Boorman. And in my naivety, I kind of knew the name. I didn't know how brilliant he was, with those extraordinary films that he made. And I remember him saying, it was very nice to see you. And then he'd do things frame up with his fingers. And then he offered me this job. And I didn't believe I got it, because it seemed so odd that I was making in a film. It was nothing of my choosing in a way. It was very nice. I was kind of selected. And then I went, and it was the most wonderful time. It was kind of hysterical. It is hysterical if you're Irish and 27 and you're hanging around for a couple of months in suits of armor. It's not what you imagine you'd be doing with your life. It just isn't. But because of the camaraderie and the friendship, and then and John Boorman, who was such a lovely, great man, and we still see him time to time. He's a right old age now, in his late 80s, but he's been such an erudite and wise man, a great man in the theatre. And I've never forgotten the fact that he gave me my first job in film.
What was something, aside from getting your first job from him, something that you learned or took away from that experience that you've kind of carried through the others?
What I learned was, when you get a job in a film and you're not an extra or a stuntman, but you actually have a featured role with dialogue, and you're supposed to be the second in command of a troupe of writers. Don't be embarrassed to say, "I think I'll need a better horse." Because I was very quiet, and I thought, oh, he's just in for a day or two, and I'll be given this old nag here, and he'd be fine. But the thing was, I was supposed to be leading, myself and another guy, a group of about 8 soldiers into a moat and onto the set. And I kept coming last because the camera was supposed to say, where's he gone again? But this horse was called Colleen, like a real Irish name. And they nicknamed her Speedy because she wasn't. And before we started, what they used to do was, I mean, I don't know if you could do it this day. I'd be in the front. I started the front, but as we went in, I would always be going backwards and they'd be flying through. They'd get a holly bush. And as soon as just before action, they'd just go to the horse's hindquarters and go. And the next thing I was off. Just gone, just hanging on. Anyway, that's the advice I would give. Don't be shy about coming forward if you need a good horse. Yeah.
That's honestly just words to live by in so many different parts of the world. But I guess I must ask you next, which one of the rest of these screen credits did you book in a pub?
Well, there may be some I can't remember.
Well, I mean, that's kind of moving into that, the romantic period with roles like Mr. Rochester in Jane Eyre, or Captain Wentworth in Persuasion. Obviously, you'd already worked in some of the great literature as a Shakespearean actor, but then also to dive into Bronte and Austen and some of these very soft and loving. Well, I mean, I guess the guys weren't always soft and loving, but the stories are by the end. What did you enjoy most about joining into those types of roles?
It was quite fascinating because it was a real challenge because when you read literature, there's a formality to it. And, when they're doing quotation marks and a character speaking, that's fine in the art of literature, because you've got the descriptive passages and then you have people speaking in a certain formal language. When you try and take that formal language and try and make it real, it's quite complicated because it can be very stilted in a way. And yet what you have to do is try and find a way, breathing-wise, to make it live and breathe in your own persona. That was a real challenge. I mean, there was that was a long time ago, but I suppose the 90s. In the 90s, I found myself, I don't mean stuck in a bad way, but stuck in the 19th century between Thomas Hardy, Jane Austen, and Charlotte Bronte, and it wasn't a bad place to be. It was away from the modern storm and drag of modern, ferocious, angry, bitter, warring life. It was a different thing. And then suddenly they put me in Ivanhoe and took me back into medieval times. And I said, I'm never going to go forward. But eventually, when the 21st century arrived, I started creeping in a bit.
Creeping in and then sometimes creeping back because, of course, we can't forget Julius Caesar in Rome.
Oh yeah, that was creeping back a bit, wasn't it? Yes, yeah, a couple of millennia. That was very thrilling. It was very scary as well. Of course, I mean the idea is like when somebody said we'd like you to play Julius Caesar, you say yeah, and you think, well, how do you do that? How do you actually play one of the most extraordinary characters from history? And you say, well, whatever you did, you have some kind of bearing about you that makes us think that you can hold it. And I said, yeah, but it's a bit more than that. There's also that mind that wishes to create an empire and which is to control. And also as a military strategist, he was one of the greats and all that. So that's when you start to do a bit of research. And there was a great book I remember came out just as we were starting it. I think it was called Rubicon by Tom Holland, who's a history writer. But it wasn't dry fact. It was very interesting. It was captivating as you read it. And it was the time of Caesar. What was he going to do? Cross the Rubicon and then at war with the Senate. And that was almost the time that the story was beginning. And that was just serendipity, really. And so we went, and I remember we went to Cinecittà. And not long before that, like Martin Scorsese had filmed The Gangs of New York there, and there were all bits of the set still there. So I was in awe of that. And then they said, right, we're going to do the read through. There's like 30 people reading, and you're Caesar, and everybody, Mark Antony, and all the fantastic company of people. And then they said, we're just going to bring you out to see the set we built. And you go out and see the set, and then your jaw drops. and you get very scared. Basically, this fear comes over you, and they see it in you, and you say, like, it's all right. He wasn't that big a man, Caesar, and the big cameras giving you the impression that it's all yours. And that's kind of how we went to work. And wonderful, wonderful memories of that time.
How did you push past those fears? Beyond the research, once the cameras do start rolling, what do you tap into?
There's something about the support, always about the support that you get from your compadres, from the people that you work with, and from the people who dress you. Mm-hmm. And April, a brilliant costume designer who would choose what to wear, even though I was carrying a bit of weight, what would make you look cool, and she'd say what, and she would be very quietly complimentary about how you were approaching the part. None of her business, but it was an outsider's view. It wasn't about actors or directors. It was just somebody else giving you a little backup that you weren't going astray. And it's always, it's not like you're looking for that, but when it comes, it just helps support you a bit. When I went on my way to work, I'd come out and walk to the set as Caesar, dressed as Caesar. And when I was walking past all the Italian workmen, they would just go, Ave Cesare, as if I was a reincarnation. And I'm saying, I'm an Irish guy, just with a toga on. But by the time I got there, I did feel that, you've got to maintain this. But the truth is, and you can't do it on your own. If people don't support you and behave as if you have this power, there's no way you're going to convince anybody. So that support of you maintaining that you are in control and have power is only hugely supported by everybody around, giving you that space to know that you support that, how they behave with you.
I know we talked a bit about Sir Ken as a great supporter, as a filmmaker, but you really have had the opportunity to work with so many incredible directors, everyone from, eventually Scorsese and Spielberg, Sam Mendes, Paul Thomas Anderson. When you kind of think about the filmmakers that have been a part of your filmography, we don't really, I'm sure, have time to go through what you learned from each person, but, what stands out to you about a great director for actors? What stands out to you about, or rather, what is important for you as an actor for directors to do, almost, if you will?
You could say let be, but that's not enough, because you also need guidance. As you think you know what you're doing, sometimes therefore you need to know every single pause and comma of everything that's going on at that time. And that's why those directors that you mentioned, Paul Thomas Anderson and Steven Spielberg, Martin Scorsese, Sam Mendes, Michael Mann, these people, they have an extraordinary minds, extraordinary. And they're also, apart from being great visualists, they pay great attention to, I guess, literature and to the word and to the sound of things. So they have this ability to harness whatever story they're telling, to harness everything with a specificity of each moment, but with wide eyes to see encapsulate the whole big arc of the story. That's what it seems to me. And they're just thrilling. I mean, of course, I was in awe, a little bit nervous, meeting Steven Spielberg, and then he was just so gracious and so gave you that space and said, let's go again, yep, and just support what he was looking from you and why he chose you, and Martin Scorsese as well, a gentleness about where they are, because they know what they're doing, and they know that, well, people have to find different ways to get onto the same boat, and know that that will be supported. And it's rather than a frustration about why I want you to do it like this, you say, because they know about, I guess, all of the different colors that make up the world. There are so many, and that color that they might never have seen might arrive suddenly and mix into the blend, and that might excite them as well. Sam Mendes I knew from theatre. We'd done a couple of plays, so to be invited, and he worked very hard for me to get in there as well, and I was always very grateful to him, because it was one of the first things I did in the United States. And Paul Thomas Anderson, watching him and Daniel Day-Lewis go to work, I mean, that was just to be around that, and it turned from like these two extraordinary artists being the two relentless laboring, wrestling, digging, working. It was, and never given up, and never sure that they got it right. You know, it was very, very exciting to be around the fringes of that.
I appreciate the humility, and I love that you do kind of mention kind of, oft being a little nervous as you step onto sets and are diving into these new environments. And I'm curious if you remember or could pinpoint the height of those nerves. One that you particularly remember being especially nervous on a project before you started, and why?
Before starting, I remember I was asked, actually it was for Sam Mendes, I was asked to take over in a week the role of Richard III on stage from Simon Russell Beale, who's a great, great actor. And he had his disc had gone down. He said, we have to come back. We've got 8 days. He gave me a day to consider it, and then I took it on. And 8 days working with the cast who were just trying to help me all the way, because it's an enormous role, and working. And then the night came to perform it for the first time, and you're just like, so many words, so many, it was 8 days, and then you do it. And at the end of it, you do it, you're exhausted, you're gone. You've just offered everything. You've lived dangerously in the moment. You've been supported by everybody. We got through it. The story was told. You're dead in the dust, and you go, I'm so tired. And then the next day you say, I have to do that again? No, that's not possible. That wasn't based on any structure or anything. That was sand and dancing and everybody living by their wits' end. And I remember getting the shakes when the sound cue came for me to walk out on my own and begin the soliloquy that started Richard III. I remember that and looking for help, and there's nothing. You were on your own. And it was an awful soliloquy that night. It was just awful because I hadn't managed to go like, come on, put the ego away. Don't worry, you have a responsibility here. Get on. But it was after that when somebody came on stage, and then I went, well, I need to go in here. That it was just felt very lonely. That's what it felt like.
I think you're allowed to have one awful one, because how many shows of Richard III did you end up doing? How long was the run?
It was quite short. It was about 6 weeks. Yeah, it wasn't like a Broadway run. It was about 6, 7 weeks. Yeah.
One is allowed to.
And by the last night, I was nearly about ready to start. It's always that way.
Of course. You're like, oh, I've got it. I'm finally here.
We're not playing on Monday? Okay. Yeah.
Well, speaking of finally here, we've gone back down memory lane just a little bit. But what have you not done that you're still itching to do? I mean, there's been musicals, you've been in Harry Potter, you've been in, the superhero world with Justice League, and of course, Mance Rayder on Game of Thrones. So there's been a continued range of things. What else?
I thought I'd join the ballet.
I'm for it.
I mean, it's time things got shook up a bit. And as we know, things are getting shook up a bit. So my ballet days may be ahead of me. I have to do a bit of work on that, of course. But it'd be an interesting ballet that would accept me in their corps de ballet, I'd have to say. I don't really know. Because I was never, when you said what do you want to achieve, there was like never any particular role I wanted to do. I guess my idea was I was just not just grateful for the work, but also the idea where people gave me the responsibility was also when seeing outside yourself and they seeing what you can do. Is I think their vision of what you can do is probably better than your own vision, if you know what I mean. You know what I mean? 'Cause they see it rather more objectively, and not say it's not just a question of what you want to do. It's what's the best thing for everybody that you do. And given whether it's size of roles or bits in the storytelling. I think that's why it's interesting. The stories themselves are what really fascinate me. And then to be part of good stories is always nice.
Well, I mean, we got to see a little bit of dancing in Belfast. I don't see why we couldn't add a pirouette or two to that.
Pirouette. I wouldn't go as far as two. Let's go one pirouette. Yeah.
We'll stick to a single. Real quick question on the Game of Thrones note. A thought that obviously you were freezing in Iceland for the majority of that, right? Were you ever back in Belfast on Game of Thrones?
Yeah, that's where I got invited to my own barbecue.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I was sent an invitation by two rather nasty pieces of work to hop on a little wooden raft, and then they set fire to me. That was close to home. Yeah, that was a welcome home barbecue. That was, yeah.
Well, I have to say that this last trip ended better than that last trip to Belfast.
Yeah, well, I still conked out, but I mean, it wasn't as brutal, let's say.
Well, what do you remember about your Belfast barbecue return home in comparison to this one?
It was quite wild. It was very strange because it was freezing cold. It was December, and it was up high in the hills, behind about 20 miles from Belfast, and there was mud everywhere. And it was a sense of, I guess, for me, of course, it was quite dramatic. But I think the characters who lasted longer than I did, they were just used to this. Here's another one. What'll we do with this one? 40 ways to kill your lover or whatever. But yeah, I just remember, and also being quite lonely because I think all the other actors who were around, they were going to go on. It was like seeing somebody get sacked. Do you know what I mean? In a way, you're getting fired now, and we're going to set fire to you while you're getting fired. So that was it. That was a farewell. And at the end of it, I go like, well, good luck, everyone.
They're like, pack your pelts and go home.
Pack your pelts and head for the hills. Yeah.
Well, we're glad that every once in a while that this crazy career can bring you back home, but always bring you to our screens and stages. Ciarán, thank you so much for diving into your filmography. On behalf of the SAG-AFTRA Foundation, I want to thank you for sharing your experiences, your process, and your craft with your fellow performers.
Thank you very much, Angelique. It's been lovely to talk to you.
Lovely to talk to you too, and congratulations yet again on your Oscar nomination.
Thank you. Thank you very much.